Welcome to this video on how to choose your book for the English 1.1 External. So in this video, we'll cover a few introductory things on how to choose exactly which text you're going to write your essay on. So we'll cover, firstly, why it is important to choose a good book. Now we're looking at books when we teach this external, rather than other written texts like short stories, poems, or song lyrics. Now you can do these if you want to, but through Learncoach, we're going to just be teaching the full-length book. Because if you choose a book, that means that you only have to focus on one, because there's enough content to talk about in one book. Because if you choose shorter written texts like short stories or poems or song lyrics, you often have to do comparisons, and this can make it harder to get good marks. So we're just going to focus on a full-length book, so hopefully that is all good with you guys as well. Secondly, we'll look at what makes a good book, then we'll look at how to choose a book, and finally some examples of good books that you can use to write your essay on. So firstly, why is it important to choose a good book? Your essay needs to be sufficiently deep, and so you need to have a book that provides sufficient depth to allow you to fully answer the question. It has to have the potential to get any grade, achieved merit, or excellence, whatever you are aiming for. You don't want to sell yourself short by starting with a book that doesn't have enough content, enough depth to it to get you a good mark. So there are specific aspects of the book which are needed for it to be good and appropriate for your essay. So for the purpose of English 1.1 and in these videos, good means good to write about in your essay, rather than how enjoyable the book is. So we're not talking about how much of a page turner the book was, how it was so good you read it in a couple of hours. We're talking about something else. So for example, a Shakespearean play may not be something that you would sit down and rip through in a couple of hours because it was so good and so hard to put down. Good books for the purposes of English can be quite dry to actually read, but the ideas, the characters, the messages are complex enough that you can really analyze them very, very well. So we're not talking about how addictive a book is to read here, even though that can be a lot more fun. We are talking about depth and the sort of analysis that you can do about the book. So what makes a good book for the purposes of analysis in an English essay? Now, a good book has many complex aspects to it, and the more aspects you have in the book, the more flexibility you will have about writing your essay. So for example, these aspects can include, but there are others as well that you can talk about, complex characters, impactful language features, and interesting settings and events that happen. So we're going to go through all of these and more in detail in the later videos, but for now you just have to be aware that a good book should have some of these features. So in addition to these aspects that I just talked about, the book should teach us something, so have an idea or message about the world or humanity or society, something like that. Or it could make us feel something, so create an emotional response in the reader. So that would usually be something like sadness if it's quite a deep or sad book, or joy if it's a really uplifting book. So if a book ticks these boxes, then it should be a good book for English 1.1. So it should have complex characters, ideas, settings that are quite interesting or detailed or complex, and it should ideally teach us something about the world and make us feel something. So how do we choose a book that has all these great aspects to it? Well, a good place to start is books that you've studied in English class. These will be specifically chosen so that they have as many of those great aspects to them as possible. Otherwise, you can look at our recommended list of books, which I'll talk about next. Or you can think about some books that you may have already read that have the previously mentioned components of a good book. So you can think about this yourself, or maybe you've already got a book lined up. But if not, here are some examples of good books that you can talk about. Animal Farm by George Orwell, Looking for Alaska by John Green, Night by Ali Weisel, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, Lord of the Flies by William Golding, Macbeth by Shakespeare, and most other Shakespeare will also be very good for English 1.1, The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time by Mark Haddon, and Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. Now these texts are actually specifically recommended by NZQA. There are reports that say that students that use these texts for their essays tend to do quite well. So I highly recommend using one of these. But you don't have to. There are other texts that have just as many good aspects to talk about. I'll be using examples throughout the next videos from these books and other books that might be quite good for you to talk about. So you can take ideas from other examples that I use as well. There are plenty of other good books to write about. Don't feel too limited by this list. But if you're stuck, it's a great place to go to. So thanks for watching this video. Good luck with choosing your book, and I'll see you in the next one.